Good evening and welcome to Momentous Live, episode 80. I'm Tristan Judra.
I'm Tasia Custody.
And I'm Gray Williams, and we're missing somebody today.
We're missing
We are.
William Arthur Andrew Silver.
Our anchor,
Forever in hearts. And you know what? I get requests from people like when Will doesn't get a chance to talk enough, people are like, you should let Will talk more. So
Will's the best.
I've gotten like comments on Will's like humor, and the bottom line here is that Will, if you're out there, if you're listening, you're missed, and hope you and Naomi recover soon. So we will soldier on without you. You can find out more about us at momentous.tv, and for links to all the socials, momentous.tv/links. And that's all we have to say about that.
So easy.
It's so easy now.
So easy.
So it's so easy, I forgot to queue up our screenshot. Oh, look at that. Good job. And the all caps, love it. Thanks, Gray.
Do what I can.
All right, so let's start with a little follow-up. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Apple event. Gray wasn't with us, but then he gave us some thoughts the following week, which was fantastic. Some of us may have ordered some things last week. And I'm just going to tell you just a quick little story. I contacted my carrier, Fido, after I got this. It arrived. The case came a couple days early, and then the iPhone 14 Pro itself came on Friday, right on time, right as scheduled. And I thought, okay, well, pretty easy. I'm just gonna I remember from the Apple event, they said, it's eSIM only. It's like, okay, well, that's an extra step with Fido. So I called Fido, the carrier. They're the Fido brand of Rogers. Rogers acquired them several years ago, and they have this new thing where you call people, or you call the support line, and they do a callback, or you can chat with their virtual agent named Jack, which is great. I want to talk to a computer. I'm trying to talk to a person, but I get to do a chat thing. And you can't actually, if you try to push a button on your phone, talk to someone, it doesn't even give you a chance to connect directly. It shoves you right, it just hangs up on you after it says, oh, here, we've texted you a code, click on this. And then you can have this virtual chat. And then maybe there you can request to talk to an agent if you want. So it's like, how about save me some steps and just do what I'm asking like the first time rather than making me jump through all these hoops. So anyhow, this virtual agent told, once I put in what I wanted to do, do the eSIM thing, it said, okay, well, you're number 49 in line. Like, okay, great. And that's practical to keep your browser window open on your phone the whole time. Because, especially when you have a 5-year-old iPhone, it's totally not going to flush the memory out if you open any other apps or anything like that. So good luck with that. Finally, I called, I guess it was by the Sunday at this point, and I just said, just call me back. This was like in the morning. 3 hours later, it was the earliest opportunity for a callback, so it's 1:30 in the afternoon. I get the call back, and they say, I explain what I need to do, and I with the eSIM, you just need to give me a QR code, right? And she's like, yeah, well, we have to mail it to you. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, wow, they should invent like an electronic way of mailing things to people. So she said, or you could go to a retail store. Okay, well, I would have done that 2 days ago. Anyhow, fine. Fine. I was busy with chores. I was trying not to have to leave the house if I didn't need to. So I pop over and look at the website, look at the closest location. Hey, there's one only 5 minutes away. Great. It's one I didn't realize was there. Pop over, get to the mall. It's like 10 after 5. They close at 6. I get there. The kiosks. I couldn't find the kiosk at first. There was like a TELUS one. There was a Freedom Mobile one. There was a Rogers one. I was like, what? I'm wandering all around this mall. It's like Lynn Valley Center is like, it's a bit of a ghost town of a mall at this point. And then there's like a Fido sign on the far side of the Rogers kiosk. Okay, cool. But it's closed like an hour early. Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So what else? So there's 2 other locations in North Van. So, I can go to the Capilano Mall one 10 minutes away, the Park Royal one 20 minutes away. I'll start with the Capilano Mall one first. Of course, I tried to call both of them to see if either of them are open. Neither of them are answering their phones. So great. I'm just going to roll the dice and hopefully I have time to get to both if one's closed. I get to the Capilano Mall one, and another sad, sad mall here in North Vancouver. And the lady there was very helpful. It was a breath of fresh air. Should have just dealt with a human being like right out of the gate. And I said, oh yeah, so I've got this, I've got the iPhone 14 Pro, and I got to get the eSIM. I need the QR code. And she's like, oh, she said, yeah, no problem. It'll cost you $10. Whatever. I'm like, yeah, fine, let's just do it. And she's like, oh, do you like have the SIM card from your phone, like your old phone? I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, and is there, what about the SIM tray on the new phone? It's like, oh, well, no, there's no SIM tray. It's it's all eSIM. She's like, don't think so. I'm like, what? Oh, as it turns out, the Canadian model of the iPhone 14 Pro has a SIM tray. So 2 days earlier, I could have simply taken the SIM card from my iPhone 10 and popped it into my iPhone 14 Pro. But of course, as soon as I got this thing, I put the case on it right away, and I didn't even think to check the side. It's in the same place as the. Oh no, it's actually on the opposite side. Whatever. Yeah, it's right there. This little tray. Like so.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, who's your local tech expert now?
Yeah. A way to waste how many days?
So meanwhile, like I'm just carrying 2 phones in my pocket if we did have to pop out at all. So, yeah. Anyway, so it's good to have humbling experiences.
Have that, by the way? Why is it that the Canadian phones are still doing the physical SIM, not an eSIM?
I think
like
not all
that.
Canadian providers have eSIM capability yet. I mean, they went through extensive negotiations with all the carriers to switch over to eSIM for the iPhone 14 Pro, or iPhone 14, I guess. And so, yeah, I mean,
so, yeah. Oh, and the other thing too is like because Fido doesn't. Fido said I tried to do the cellular, swap over the eSIM one to the other, and it said on my phone, "Oh, your carrier doesn't support this." Maybe it was just the supporting of the transfer. Like I don't even know. But look, if you look in this diagram, there's the very, very slight difference in the marketing images from USA and Canada. So there's USA.
You can barely see it.
Canada, there it is. Yeah, right. Yeah. And it's just like anyway. So. I guess the moral of the story is just like when you get a new device, just look all over, look all over it.
Look at it first.
Check it out. I always encourage people to explore the features of their phone, but maybe like explore the physical landscape, the topography, as it will, of your new device, because it's amazing what you can learn and how many days of frustration you could save yourself.
You'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Fool me once.
But I have to admit, one of the most talked about things from the Apple event was the dynamic island. Like, here's how we can, take what was, the notch and make it into, which was a blight, according to some people, and make it into a feature. You're playing stuff, and then when you make things go away, it just sucks up into the dynamic island. I think people are just going to start calling it the island, if anything. But it's whimsical. So we got the return of whimsy, which people had claimed Apple had lost. But such whimsy is being taken to extremes now with the app developers getting aboard, because most apps don't support any kind of interactions with the dynamic island yet. There's some features and interactions they get for free with the just at the OS level. But some apps are starting to customize themselves. And there is one from Apollo, which is a Reddit reader app that they've added these things called, I think it's Pixel Pals. And Pixel Pals. You can have a little kitty or a dog or a hedgehog or other animals, and they'll just go and sit on top of the little dynamic island there. And it's like, I've never used the
island.
Yeah, I generally just use the native Reddit app. I've never really used Apollo. This might make me switch, quite honestly, because it reminds me. There's an old Mac app from the 90s called Nico. It may even be older than that, Neko, and it was like a little black and white, a 1-bit cat that used to like run around your screen, and it was adorable. So, you can download the Apollo app from the App Store if you want to enjoy a little Pixel Pal who just hangs out on the dynamic island. And another game that's come out, again, I love it when these people jump on the features right away. There's a game called Hit the Island. So another app that's taking advantage of the dynamic island. And of course, I had to check that out. This reminds me of our old get connected days, and these apps would be coming out. It was just like my last phone was still littered with apps from the old days because I had transferred everything from the previous phone. So, when we were always testing out apps, and Tasia, you were doing all sorts of app segments. But here is, it's kind of like Breakout. I failed. And it's like Breakout, except your only goal is to hit the island, and it bounces back, and then it gets faster and faster, and every once in a while it'll add an extra ball. And of course, there's a bit of a history between Breakout and Apple. Some folks might know that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak worked on a version of Breakout for Nolan Bushnell of Atari back in the mid 70s, before Apple got their start, and it kind of helped get Apple going back in the early days. And there's that whole story of Steve Jobs collecting a certain amount of money from Atari, and then only paying Steve Wozniak a small fraction of that money, less than he really deserved for the engineering effort required to make the classic game Breakout. So again, if you've got an iPhone 14 or 14 Pro or 14, no, so it won't work with the 14.
14 Pro.
14 Pro or 14 Pro Max. You can enjoy the Pixel Pals on your Reddit app known as Apollo, or Hit the Island, or I'm sure lots of other novelty apps that are soon to come our way.
If that's not reason enough to get into an iPhone 14 Pro, I mean...
You've just ordered yours right now, haven't you, Tasia? Just like seeing
right now,
that?
it just happened.
A couple other quick little bits of tech news. One, Nvidia announced just in time for Ethereum proof of work mining to go away. Nvidia has announced next generation RTX 4090 and RTX 4080 GPUs. Great, you've got a gaming PC. What's the lowdown on these? Why does anyone need a more of a beast of a GPU nowadays? What are people doing with them?
Well, need really comes down to two things. One, you're looking to do, high-end graphics performance in whether it's rendering, or you're working in high-end workstation style image rendering stuff. And two, you're me and you want to play 4K gaming at 144 frames per second or more. Realistically speaking, I mean, these things, they're a great step forward. They're in some cases between 2 and 4 times faster. Nvidia says they'll consume the same amount of power that the 3000 series currently does. And so that's great. The actual performance of these things is, we have yet to see, but from all accounts, it is what they say it's going to do. Up until this point, we were seeing a lot of folks that were using cards like this to do mining for things like Ethereum. And there's still plenty of cryptocurrencies that you can mine for, Ravencoin being a Bitcoin fork that does actually still use GPU mining. So the idea that someone could get one of these things and actually make it profitable with that type of mining, absolutely a thing. We have also seen a massive glut of cards on the market as people have been selling off their Ethereum mining farms. So this is an interesting market for Nvidia to be in. There's about to be, or there is supply where there has been none before. Their suggested retail prices for these are actually reasonable. Like they're not where people have been paying over the last little while. So it's gonna be interesting to see, like, are people going to opt for a discounted, possibly, work to the bone 3090 or 3080, or would they pay a little bit extra for a 4000 series? I know for myself, like I get about 105 to 120 frames per second in Destiny in 4K right now, and I'd love to be able to move to a 144 hertz monitor, but it's sort of a chicken and egg scenario because I can't hit that 144 hertz consistently. I don't really need the monitor, and if I don't have the monitor, there's no real reason to buy a graphics card that can do it. So sit here pleasantly at frames per second in 4K and be happy with it.
That should do you. Now, is it my misunderstanding, or do a lot of people simply play at 1440p rather than pushing all the way up to 4K because of the extra horsepower that's required to do 4K at decent frame rates nowadays?
Pretty much bang on, right? If you're looking to get past that 60 frames per second, and 120 and 144 do absolutely make a difference. I can play Destiny at 120 frames per second at 4K on my PlayStation 5. The downside there is I have to use a controller and not my keyboard and mouse. So it really is a trade-off. Do I want to be more precise and have a lower frames per second so your reaction time may not be quite as high, or do I want to be less precise but I've actually got a better graphics throughput, and so I may be able to react faster to something. I'm not very good at PvP anyway, so it's not really much of a trade-off. But
NVIDIA's found themselves, as you alluded to, in a weird situation where they're competing with their older models now, as so many proof of work miners are dumping them onto the market. So maybe for those who don't need the absolute bleeding edge in NVIDIA GPU performance, you could get a great deal on a 3000 series or even a 2000 series and just be perfectly happy, especially if you're not rocking a gigantic screen or need,
what we really do need is an odometer. Right, like how hard have these things been worked? If you had an odometer on your video card, that'd be great.
And as for other proof of work tokens that can be mined nowadays, I was hearing yesterday that Ravencoin at this point is barely profitable to just like 10 cents a day or something like that, depending. So you're gonna need to get a real good deal on your electricity and on those old beat up cards.
That is at current prices, mind you.
Yeah.
Right.
If it goes somewhere in the future, but there's got to be a market for it. It's like, I'm glad I'm not in that business. That's all I can say, because you got to tie up a lot of capital. In other news, that would have easily passed us by as being, admittedly, mostly Apple people, aside from maybe the PC gaming that you're doing on a regular basis, Gray, is that there's a Windows 11 2022 update. So it's interesting from a marketing perspective, how Apple's been doing yearly updates to their OSs for years and years now, and they always, give them a unique name. And the last several names have been based on California natural features or landmarks, such as Ventura or Big Sur or Monterey or El Capitan and Catalina and the like. So Windows, we had Windows 8 and we had Windows 10. No one knows what happened to Windows 9. We had Windows 11, but each of them had a number of updates in the meantime, but there was not a ton of fanfare. And maybe that's a way that Windows can, Microsoft can continue to differentiate against Apple. It's like, we're not about marketing, we're about like the nuts and bolts, and this is a serious operating system, etc. But the risk of that is like people actually not even realizing that they might be getting some useful new features. And in this update, there's some interesting stuff. Some of these things may sound a little familiar to users of other operating systems, but such as focus modes, do not disturb modes, accessibility features, natural voices, smart app controls for like improved systems, system security, better video calls and content creator tools, a gaming hub. The ability, we've talked a bit about in the past, I think when we talked about Windows 11 last year, the ability to run Android apps, further integration with the Xbox ecosystem, and then an interesting feature here about making it easier to reduce your device's carbon emissions, basically giving you information on when to be maybe recharging your laptop or having your desktop PC plugged in and active, whereby you have the greatest chance of using green energy and so on. Now, Gray and Tasia and I and even Will, we tend to be the tech people in our respective families. Tasia, when I imagine not everyone in your family is a diehard Apple user, and you probably have a bit of a heterogeneous ecosystem out there amongst your family and friends. When someone, maybe a Windows user or even a Mac user, comes to you and said, "Hey, I just heard about this new update to my operating system. Should I do it?" What do you generally tell them, and what would you tell them about this update in particular?
I usually always say wait till there's the little minor updates, which often include a lot of bug fixes. So my first thing is always wait. After wait, my second thing is always back up your device first before you install any new operating system. I don't care what device it is. But also, we're laughing about this whole green energy thing, but that is rumored that that's coming to the iPhone, and it's going to be called like clean energy charging or something as well. So
Yeah, it's
I feel like everybody's kind of hopping on this bandwagon, right? So we'll see. How do any of us actually know? It's like when Google Flights added like the emissions now on the flights. Like I don't have any way of actually checking the emissions log on these flights. So do you know what I mean? But like we're trusting in our tech gods here on these.
You don't
But it
stick
is
your
interesting to see they're all jumping
your
on
air
it.
care dongle in the tailpipe of the jet before.
Right?
Well,
So you're saying if I fly Air Canada and we sit on the tarmac for 2 hours, this is a greener flight?
well, so the, clean energy is coming in 16.1. It's in the beta, and it's only in specific areas. But it
For
actually the way
iOS
that you can
16.1,
verify
is that correct? Yeah, okay.
iOS 16.1, yeah. And
Okay.
the way that it's actually being done is it's looking at your location, and then it's looking at the price of electricity or the based on what the electricity generator is reporting, how they're generating that power. So if some folks are, on solar and then coal or whatever else it is, like it's basically looking at it and going, okay, these are hours that are lower consumption, so we'll charge during these hours. Or if they do have an identifiable time of day that they're using renewable energy, then that's how that's working. It really is up to the electricity provider to be able to report that in order for Apple and Microsoft to be able to look at it. But it's not a bad way of doing it. When we take a look at what happened with California and their blackouts that they were about to have, asking people to not use that electricity did actually save the grid from going down. And there were a few people who, once they received the request, I saw one post on Twitter where the guy said, yeah, I'm running my air conditioner and my microwave and this and that, and, screw you. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do.
That's the equivalent of rolling coal. Like that's a DB move. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's the coal roll
Seriously.
for sure. And it's really, really disappointing that some folks do that. But it's for myself right now, looking at operating systems, Windows 11 is an interesting one for me, because I built my own system. I went out and I bought a trusted platform module to go into it so I could upgrade to Windows 11. And that was right around the time that I started having problems with my Windows PC, which turned out that the nearly 10-year-old power supply was basically frying itself on a daily basis. So I pulled that trusted platform module out thinking maybe that was causing the issue. And I haven't put it back in and I haven't upgraded yet. So this might actually be my call to plug this into my system and actually upgrade. When friends and family now ask me, advice on upgrading their operating systems, I let them know that I am not their tech support. I have no desire to do so. I do not consent. Please ask someone else. I'm done answering questions. I love you all. Not doing it anymore.
You can't avoid the Amber Alerts, Gray. They're going to come, whether it's friends or family. I need that tech support. Speaking of Amber Alerts,
I just put my headphones in yesterday. And so it was actually it was quite sedate for me because it had adjusted the audio based on my ear protection preferences, but I could hear them going off in other suites.
Yeah, Tasia, we had an Amber Alert yesterday evening, was it around 10:45 or so, and it was a missing child. It sounds like they were. It sounded like maybe the mother had taken the child unlawfully, whatever. And the details are still working themselves out.
Allegedly.
But, allegedly. And for our lawyers, our crack legal team here at Momentous Live. And so the weird thing is, though, when I was out post roller hockey, burgers at A&W. Home of the Teen Burger, and they had
this episode brought to you by
the entire Burger family. To be fair,
good food,
all our phones,
good food.
Yeah, all our phones went off at the exact same time, which is remarkable. But the weird thing is I get home and mucking about, winding down, showering and staring at my phone for hours before going to sleep, and then I go to grab my iPhone 10 for some reason because I had already, I guess, set the new phone, like the alarm on it to go on. I just said, I just need to check one more thing, as to ruin my sleep cycle even more. And I unlock my iPhone 10, and this is like at 2 a.m. maybe, and the Amber Alerts starts going, and of course my poor darling wife Stephanie was like, it's like, why are you doing that now when it was like over 3 hours ago? So good times.
It's fortunate that it was put out so early because they did actually find the child and the mother in Calgary.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so she was booting.
All right, moving on to we have a bit of a theme. We've been talking about energy and power and recharging and all that. We just have a few EVs we're going to talk about, and then some related issues. Some of these we're going to breeze past and leave for our loyal viewers to check our show notes, which usually get populated within an hour or two after we shut down the live stream. But some interesting trends that we're noticing. We've seen a few of these and discussed them in the past on Momentous Live, some specific models coming from China of electric vehicles. And this is a trend that continues to grow and grow. We've got BYD is one of more than 450 registered electric vehicle firms in China. So we're lots and lots of automakers there, and brands that you and I have never heard of, but some of whom we're going to start to see more and more of as some of them eventually make their way over. Some of them are definitely cute and small and appropriate for their markets and the types of roads they have and the sort of efficiency they're looking for. Not a lot of large families necessarily, thanks to decades-long family planning policies in China, which are now going to result in long-term demographic challenges for that nation. But we got some of these are reminiscent of the Mercedes Smart 4.2 concept. So a lot of these are two-seaters as well, but super efficient and really adorable. So we'll see how many of these actually make it to our shores, courtesy of, depending on various tariffs and maybe even sanctions if anything happens with Taiwan in the near future. But they also have the higher end market as well too, where there's quite a vibrant high end auto market in China as well. So some of their manufacturers are addressing that. So along with that theme, we've actually got a couple of nostalgic plays coming too. One was the mini Aceman concept, and some when they fully electrify the Mini, and we've touched on this a little bit in the past, and I know a certain one of us here may be particularly interested in there. But even more, why have an electrified Mini when you could have an electrified Pokemon themed Mini, where you could actually use gaming controllers, say Mini and Pokemon collaboration, which I'm not really unsure how it all works, but apparently you can plug in your game console and then use the vehicle's exterior projector to display your gameplay on whatever surface your car's parked in front of. Gray, as our official Mini Cooper correspondent, what are your thoughts on these these stories, particularly the Mini ones? Because what we see from the Mini is kind of the size of a lot of the vehicles we're seeing out of China. And do you think Mini's going to have a chance against these probably Chinese vehicles, which are half the price? And will the Pokemon angle be enough to differentiate? It's, of course, the other nostalgia from the British heritage too.
Right. I don't really know that the Pokemon concept car is going to fly with a lot of folks. Maybe if you're really into Pokemon Go, this could be the thing. If they could integrate some controls Pokemon Go into the dashboard, that might be handy. Needless to say, I do not Pikachu's that one. I do like the Aceman though. The Aceman looks very, very cool. I'd love to see the Countryman done in a full electric. I didn't buy the hybrid Countryman because they wanted an extra, I think it was $25,000 for just adding that 40 kilometers of electric range, which for me to save that amount of fuel over I think maybe I've got 10,000 kilometers on the car. It's not much. In 4 years, it's no more than that. But
we're not driving a lot nowadays.
We're low. 40,000 kilometers I've got on the car. But in any case, with the Chinese EVs, the interesting thing here is going to be software. Right. The Tesla has proven to us that the electric vehicle is actually about a union of hardware and software. And I think, looking at how people are going to be interacting with their vehicles going forward, the standard of what we expect is climbing higher and higher. And I'm curious to see how well, some of these smaller startup EV companies from China can do. If we're looking at something like open source software that might help them catch up. But right now, looking at where Tesla is and looking at where other companies around the world are. They're focused on things like optimizing range by changing driving patterns, or managing self-driving. So it's going to be very, very curious to see. Right now, you can buy a truck body from China that's about $2,000, and with all of the electrics put in and shipping, it comes to about $8,000 or $9,000. It's not terribly expensive, but it is an arduous experience. And even when it's running, it's kind of still a bit of a beta experience. So, is this a sleeping giant situation? Absolutely. I don't know that a sleeping giant is necessarily what you need when this market is going to be so nimble, though.
So in other there we go. In other nostalgic EV news, Volkswagen's ID.Buzz, which we've been talking about for over a year here on Momentous Live, is creeping ever closer to an actual release. Some media outlets are starting to get some first drive reviews under their belts, and they're saying it's supposed to be coming to the United States in 2023 and be in Europe this year. Of course, Europe gets it first because, of course, naturally, Volkswagen's based in Germany, and this last time we checked, that was part of Europe. But I'm a little torn on this because I love the look of the original Volkswagen minibus, and used to joke with friends, as I probably mentioned in high school, that someday I would live in one. I realize now that maybe that's not such something to aspire to. This new one looks kind of cool. Maybe not some of the design choices I would have made, and very spacious, and I'm sure we're going to see camperized versions of these. Of course, the battery pack components are make the floor a little higher than we might like. So we'll see how practical it ends up being in the long run. Something that's possibly a bit more practical might be something like one of the Rivian offerings that we've also talked about in the past, and they are starting to make their ways into reviewers' hands as well. The R1T and the R1S, and I'm sure Gray will have some thoughts on that. But as part of the Rivian story, there are some challenges for people just in EVs in general. Those people don't live in single family homes. Where do you charge up? And people who live in condos, apartments, or or don't have charging at work, like where do people charge? And there are charging stations here and there. Some of them aren't super reliable. The Tesla obviously has the strongest network there, and they are looking at opening it up to others by way of licensing and adapters and whatnot. So we'll have an article in the show notes about this issue. But one of the approaches that Rivian is proposing is something called the Adventure Network of fast charging sites. They opened their first 3 of them, level 3 stations, and they're looking to pull a Tesla, if they can obviously be well capitalized enough to do that, because when people want to go adventuring in these sorts of vehicles, we want to be able to fill up. And so we've gotten some maps here of what their plans are. We saw maps from Tesla in the past, and they eventually pretty much got there. So before I throw it to you, Gray, with your thoughts on Rivian and the like, I just want to ask Tasia, if in the concepts we've seen so far in some of the actual real world shipping vehicles we've been looking at here, what appeals to you most? What of maybe sort of a unique offering from China that we've not seen before, offering a different take on EVs, maybe different than what European or North American designers have in mind? Or are you fond of what we're seeing from Mini, kind of the retro cool, and by the same token, the Volkswagen ID.Buzz, again tapping into that nostalgia? Or something slightly more, traditional, even though it's got the front end looks a little different on the Rivians, but a bit beefier. But of course, a price tag to go with that. What's the most attractive on that spectrum to you?
I would only do one of the China cars if it comes with the wings, like in the photo. I think that's super practical. But
Fair,
there's like these giant wings that are coming out of it. No, realistically, probably something like the Rivian, but I do like the look of the Minis. So I'm a wee bit torn. I'm bummed about the I'm bummed about the VW bus because I feel like they should have just completely made the retro version, like kept with the retro. Like I don't want a fancy new looking VW bus. I want the
I think
old
this is
one.
actually a
It
really
can
nice
be
adaptation of
new,
that, though.
but like I want it to look like the same roundness and lines, and it can look new, but it looks old, but it's new.
And I want it to be horribly underpowered so I can barely get my family up a hill.
I
Just
want
like
all
the olden
latest
days.
gadgets inside. Like, let me be clear. I want the latest gadgets inside. I'd like air conditioning. Like, it's gonna be new, but I want it to look old on the outside.
Yes.
Like, that makes sense. Line and shape wise.
Fair enough. Gray, what are your thoughts?
Like, honestly, like I'm thrilled that Rivian is putting this adventure network in. I drove up to Merritt this past week in an RV, which I very much would like. The VW bus of camper vans, slightly elongated, maybe again flatter front. But I'm looking forward to that because that might be my thing. I've got a deposit down on a Rivian, but we'll see kind of where that goes. The interesting thing was there was sort of this conglomeration of silver-haired, later middle-aged white men gathered around the chargers there, who were all very, very self-congratulatory about their use of electric vehicles, and I was like, good on you.
Oh, those smug emissions. I don't know.
It was just funny because like there was just a very similar look to everybody that was there. I'm like, well, that makes sense. You guys can afford this, and it seems like you care enough to actually switch over to electric. But having more access to more charging would be good. I know getting up there and getting back, there was probably about $400 worth of gasoline that was burned to get 4 people to Merritt and back. And I'm really looking forward to not doing that anymore.
Well, the good news is that Rivian hopes to install some 3,500 chargers at 600 sites nationwide, that nation being the US, but also we have a sprinkling of planned chargers in British Columbia and Alberta as well. Not so much. It looks maybe a little bit in Toronto and along the St. Lawrence River there too. But so its time will come. I mean, especially as we start to see Rivians actually arrive. What's the date on yours? Do you have one yet?
I don't. I placed it late.
Okay, gotcha. Meanwhile, the F-150 Lightnings are starting to show up. Did I mention that a couple of weeks ago? I ran into someone on the street with an F-150 Lightning, and he was super stoked about it and made the straight shot from Kelowna all the way to Vancouver in one go. But he was feathering the throttle a little bit, but he made it, and it was a. I think Ford's got a winner there with the F-150 Lightning because it's they very well thought through. It's work oriented. It's got a lot of features there for workers, and it's trucky. It's not spaceshipy. It's trucky. And so Rivian, I think, is following that playbook to a certain extent, but because they've got a fresh brand, they're not tied to the legacy and the Ford canon, so to speak. So they can push it even further. Maybe not quite so Cybertruck far though, because that's maybe a little far for folks. Now, on the whole battery topic, there's some other stories that we will include in the show notes, but one of them has to do with how cars are constructed and how the batteries may become part of the actual chassis of the car. That is one approach being proposed by Tesla and Chinese companies such as BYD that we mentioned earlier and CATL. So I'm not sure what this is going to do for the repairability and replaceability of battery cells, but the whole notion that you can save weight on your car by having the batteries form part of the structure of the car itself is kind of an interesting idea, and just shows that they haven't stopped innovating, right? Any way we can reduce weight and get more mileage, more range from these vehicles will help set people's minds at ease. And those who have an EV, we'll include a link in the show notes as an article from Wired on how to take care of your electric vehicle battery. And some of the issues it mentions here have to do with the temperature when you're charging your car, of course the temperature that you're in which you're driving your car. Batteries don't generally like extreme heat or extreme cold. They don't like to be overcharged, of course. And if you want your battery to last long, don't try to not have a lead foot. Anything you can do to increase the range from trip to trip will actually increase the life of your battery, generally speaking, as well. And there are new battery formulations that are on the way too that may change the calculus a little bit. Now, Tesla itself isn't limited to merely car batteries in their EVs. They also have something called the Tesla Powerwall. But Toyota hasn't been standing still, even though that they seem like desperately behind in the EV race. And we've talked about some of the Tesla pure EVs coming out, as well as the plug-in hybrids. The RAV4 Prime's got gigantic lists, back order lists. But Toyota has actually been working on its own energy storage system for homes. So you may have read or seen stories about how electric vehicles themselves could help stabilize an electrical power grid when there are peak load situations where the power from people's cars could help power their homes. Well, if you want to spend a few $1,000, you can get a Powerwall from Tesla installed, or one of these systems from Toyota too. So it's good to see that we're not just leaving it to Tesla to solve these problems, that there's competition there, which will help spur them on. And because there's a gigantic market there, especially when we talked about that story from California with potential brownouts and how do we avoid these things. Well, the more batteries are out in the world, not just in cars, but in our homes, it can help stabilize the grid when necessary until such point as they decide to get more capacity online, nuclear. So that's a whole nother.
I actually started working on something in this vein a couple of weeks ago. And just looking at power consumption over when I was at Burning Man, a lot of folks had deep cycle marine batteries and were using inverters. And so people are now basically looking at inverters, whether they're 12, 24, or 48 volts, and looking at lithium iron phosphate batteries that can have, kilowatts of power in them. And tried something with that over the weekend to power part of the light show at Burn in the Forest. Interesting experiment. There was some wiring that I have to do on one of the inverters in order to make it work with a deep cycle battery where it's not being charged by an alternator always. But it is actually practical. So for camping next year, I'm actually looking at building something like this, like a mini Powerwall, in order to be able to take with me that isn't one of these, grab and go battery packs. Is something that can actually store large amounts of power from solar and perhaps charge faster.
And of course, the hidden benefit of something like that is that even in a home like domestic situation, if we have issues with power, power outages and whatnot, if you've got those things fully charged up, they could get you help you in a pinch when if you've got a temporary brownout or blackout in your area. We're very fortunate where we live. That doesn't happen all that often, but in other areas, that seems to be more frequent occurrence. What's the power stability like in your region? Tasia, are you at all entertaining the thought of getting a Tesla Powerwall or offering from someone such as Toyota, to go along with your RAV4 electric version when you finally get it?
Yeah, well, it's on my list. Like, I'm saving for my next car, which would probably be a hybrid first. But yes, I want to try to do as much as I can in terms of the more green energy space, or taking the load off the environment. So like right now I have rain barrels, even though I live in the desert, and everybody thought I was nuts. But it was like, it rains. I would like to collect that.
Beautiful.
And so things like that anything I can do that just takes the little personal pressure off. And if more people did that. So yes, I would definitely look into it. My biggest issue here is our heat and our extreme heat. And when I can't get a good answer on how long these batteries will last, how much they're going to cost to replace them, it's like but I'll dip the toe. I'll go hybrid first, dip the toe.
Well, you make a good point there about what we can each do on an individual basis, because you get enough people doing something small, it can add up to something big. And that case that Gray mentioned earlier in the show, whereby messages were going out to the public to, maybe unplug a couple of things just to get us through this rough patch at the moment. That's kind of like a last, sort of a worst case scenario. You want to not do that if you don't need to. But in general, by encouraging people to conserve. I remember, the whole 3 R's of recycling was like the first thing was supposed to be reduce, right? So reducing your need. And by doing simple things like rain barrels, then you're easing up the pressure on the water supply and the reservoirs. We've talked in past episodes about, the Lake Mead and the Colorado River and how many states it's supplying and all that pressure there. So, the less that we need because we're capturing other natural sources such as rainwater, then great. And if enough people do that, that can add up to something. Other issues like people removing their front lawns. How many people use their front yards after all? Not most people tend to do stuff in their backyards because it's more private. So what do you need an ornamental, grass lawn in your front yard for? Like, especially in desert areas. So you could have something that's a little bit more native to that environment, more deserty in your front yard. And you're starting to see more people do things like that, which, eases up the demand on water supply there. So if we have that kind of thinking extended to our power consumption as well, whether it's time of day or just overall usage, of course, we want to stay comfortable as much as possible with it, whether that's heating or cooling. And so what are some passive ways that we can be doing that? And there's all sorts of, tips and tricks online to help us, especially during those extreme weather events, because we want to keep our supplies of whether they're water or power nice and robust, and to avoid situations where, we saw in Texas a year and a half ago, where you got these black swan sort of events and just they weren't prepared for it because it was such an unusual thing to have an ice storm in Texas at in the late spring. So every little bit we can do helps. So thumbs up on the rain barrels, Tasia.
Thank you.
Now, one other little bit in that mind is that Toyota is also recycling electric vehicle batteries with a co-founder of Tesla, who you may have heard his name before, J.B. Straubel. There was a few co-founders of Tesla, and some are persona non grata now. And Elon came in fairly early. He wasn't an original founder, but he was in there within the first year or two and injected a whole ton of money, and then eventually took over. But one of the key things with all this battery production that's being done for all these EVs, that requires all sorts of mining of minerals such as lithium and nickel and other things, depending on the type of batteries being used. We want to recapture as much of that as possible. So efforts such as this one from Toyota and Redwood will help there. So it's good to see that there are initiatives like that underway as well. Now, the whole world of batteries can get a little dicey, and we've heard about battery fires in certain EVs, of course, because Tesla is one of the most popular brands of EVs out there. There's been a number of Tesla fires that have been documented, and they make the news, and people get concerned. Well, you take that into a whole another scale. A Tesla Megapack is kind of like a Powerwall, but for an industrial scale power plant. So at PG&E, which is one of the power companies in California, they had a fire just earlier today, about 18 hours ago or so. And of course, when you've got battery fires, you can have some nasty chemicals in the air, and they're asking residents to stay indoors, turn off ventilation systems, and the like. So we need to, we need to be aware of some of the potential side effects of using these hardware technologies for storage. Like everyone, a lot of people are on board with things like solar and wind. The problem with solar and wind is that the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So how do you get that power when that's not happening? You need to store it somehow. So one of the ways to store it is through these large industrial scale battery applications. But we need to bear in mind that those come at a cost, not only, a cost to the environment in terms of, mining and transport and manufacturing and all that kind of stuff, and a potential cost for incidents such as this. So again, we want to look at, nice clean sources of power. I think geothermal has really been underrepresented in a lot of cases, and that tends to be a bit more reliable. Again, nuclear fission is still unpopular, but is having a little bit of a renaissance. Fusion, if we ever get there, will help. And then, of course, in the places that geographically are compatible, dams are the ultimate battery, right? Because then you can access that power when you need it. So these kinds of situations are rare, but they are a potential real risk. And if we needed it here in British Columbia, we've got BC Hydro, power stations, substations all over the place, but they're more generally for relaying live power, live electricity in the grid. They're not so much for storage, but in certain jurisdictions, they're going to have these big battery situations. And the more and more there are, the greater the risk of this sort of thing is going to be. Gray, what are your general thoughts on this particular issue here? How concerned should we be about it? And do you see any preferable alternatives to industrial scale battery operations such as this, which come with their inherent risks?
I mean, realistically speaking, these things are installed all over the place. There was a massive installation of them in Western Australia where it gets very, very hot, and there haven't been any issues up to date. So I'd say this is actually a pretty, statistically speaking, this was probably the time when something like this would be apt to happen. I don't foresee like a glut of these things happening. The one thing that kind of occurs to me though is, if we're looking at keeping things just a little bit cooler, Tesla does have a sister company that's good at putting things underground. The Boring Company being able to basically set things up where you're not exposed to quite as much direct heat might be a good way to keep these things from being more of a risk, more of a liability. And in such a case where something is underground and perhaps it is isolated, staving off the oxygen for a fire wouldn't be the worst thing that they could do either. So yeah, not much to really report there other than fires happen.
Now, if we're like Tasia, we have enough rain barrels, maybe we can help put them out ourselves, right?
Right.
One of the things though with battery fires are really, really hard to put out. There, some of the Tesla car battery fires that we've seen reported on, where they've had like 35 fire trucks on the scene, for example. It's a real dilly of a pickle. Anyway, so that about wraps it up for our little journey through electric vehicles, some battery issues, be they in the cars themselves or in our homes, and some things we can look forward to and some things we can hopefully avoid. So I have one little bit of entertainment news. Something crossed my desk yesterday that I'm a little interested in, and maybe you guys will be as well. A trailer dropped for the sequel to Knives Out, and it's known as Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. So now that Daniel Craig is officially done as James Bond, we might be seeing some more Knives Out movies. And and he's a great character. You've both seen Knives Out, right?
Yes.
Mm-mm.
Oh, Tasia, you got trust me. Ooh. So Tasia, it's not robots or aliens or superheroes or anything like that. This should be right up your alley. Okay. It's Daniel Craig. He's kind of got a Southern accent going. If you can buy that, does a great job. Directed by Rian Johnson, who's directed great movies like Looper and a controversial Star Wars one and so on. But neat director. They've got a great ensemble cast here. I'm getting kind of Poirot sort of vibes from this whole franchise. We've had the reboot of the whole Poirot series with Kenneth Branagh, of all people, playing Poirot with that epic mustache. We had the Murder on the Orient Express, and now and then Death on the Nile more recently. So this seems like this is kind of developed in parallel, but a lot edgier and real puzzle box sort of movie. So I have to say, I, for one, am looking forward to Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. So check out the first Knives Out, Tasia. That's your homework.
Okay, I've got homework now.
Gray, any thoughts on the original Knives Out?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not watching the trailer because I don't want to spoil it for myself, so I will leave it there.
That's okay. We'll still get a content hit from YouTube anyway, because I probably played enough of it there. They really love doing that.
I gotta stop doing that. Start reversing the video on that.
Exactly. All right, so we're into some picks of the week here, and starting. Who are we starting with? Who picked Simone here?
I did.
All right. Okay. Here's a challenge. Try and pronounce her last name, because it's not what you think.
It's not Gertz?
I don't think so. It's Gray?
Really?
No, it's something. It's not. It's not exactly. You'd think it's like maybe Welsh or something. It's not. But you know how Welsh words, when you look at them, or some like Celtic words, you look at them, it's like,
Okay.
oh, they don't sound anything like they're spelled. We got a little bit of that, maybe half as bad. So, what are your thoughts on famous robot builder and YouTuber and brain cancer survivor, I believe, Simone
Yes.
Gertz?
She had a massive tumor. Yeah.
Oh,
I love her. So she kind of became viral like quite a few years ago for like building her what she calls crappy robots.
crap.
But it's really quite amazing to see like her
Mhm.
build these things, and the videos turn out really funny, like when a robot's trying to put makeup on her and it's just like smacking her in the face. But she built like a Tesla pickup truck. You know, she like it just that was probably her biggest undertaking ever. But it just, her videos are wonderfully done. She's so bright, she's funny, and I just think it's a great channel to subscribe to. So that is my pick of the week. I'm never disappointed in her content.
She's only at 2.64 million subscribers, so maybe we can help get her to 2.65. But no, she's definitely one of a kind YouTuber there, and I second that choice. Good choice there. I haven't checked out the truckload one yet. That looks epic. One of the early ones of hers I remember was she had some robots that were like pouring cereal for her and stuff like with the milk, and it was a disaster.
A mess.
And that's what's so funny about them too. It's like crappy robots, using a different word. Gray, pick of the week from you, sir.
Yeah, I've got the Headache Sound Omni, and so this is something that I picked up after talking with Will about scratching. And this is it's really cool little record player. It's a standalone device where it does play records, but you can also use it to scratch. And I just recently saw it in the World Turntablist Championships. Looks very neat. I did buy it in the blue because why wouldn't you? And yeah, so very sexy, very neat. Lots of really cool hi-fi pieces to this. So it's a great piece of equipment. CNC'd aluminum. And so I'm eagerly awaiting its arrival, and hopefully we'll be able to show you guys something. The goal here was actually for Will and I to hang out and for us to be able to do this. So Will, you got to get well soon. So when it arrives, we can get to scratching.
So to be clear, this isn't the sort of turntable that you would necessarily like set up in your living room and just like put on your repressing of Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. Is this not more meant for as a dedicated scratching unit?
It's meant to do both. So it actually supports digital vinyl as well. It supports regular record playing, and it supports scratch record playing. It does have a built-in battery, so you can take it on the road.
Perfect.
And it does have a built-in phono preamp, so if you want to put it into an existing speaker system, easy to do.
Gotcha. Good choice. Good choice. It's I'm the whole vinyl resurgence in the last decade or so. It's easy to disparage some latecomers to the trend as hipsters and all that, but I honestly don't mind. I just love the fact that it's managed to keep a lot of record stores going, because there was a time when they were just like, most of the record stores I went to in the 80s and 90s are long gone, except for like one and out of about half a dozen. And there's a few others that hung on in other parts of town. But it's been nice to see that that interest, from subsequent generations, and also some other folks who they grew up and they have a bit of nostalgia and a bit more disposable income. I think the cassette revival might be a bridge too far. That's more of like a novelty, like collector's thing you see at gigs. But I don't see a ton of people actually playing cassettes, but I see people actually sitting down and playing vinyl records, and is more of like a deliberate act of enjoyment rather than just doing like what I tend to do most of the days nowadays, and just like hit shuffle on the iPhone and whatever happens, right? So someday I'll set up one or more of my 4 turntables in the basement, and don't even get me going, I guess. My pick of the week. It's an easy one. Can you guys guess what it is?
I can definitely guess.
Yeah?
And I guess it's your new device.
It's my new device.
Dynamic island.
With my dynamic island. So here it is here. Yeah. I gotta say,
your physical sim.
With my physical sim, it just swapped over. It was so easy. So just really quick, of course, the 5-year jump from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 14 Pro. The size it's just like a little bit taller, so it's not too bad. I like the high refresh rate screen. variable refresh rate screen, so it's buttery smooth interface, which is noticeable. And once you get used to it, and then you go back to something that doesn't have the higher refresh rates, it's like, oh, it's like watching a 24p cinema film. It's a different experience. So that's nice. Of course, the photos are amazing. The low light photos are game changer. And those of you who have had, iPhones 11, 12, 13 and whatnot have enjoyed a lot of that. But of course, the cameras just get better and better. The 48 megapixels being pixel binned down to 12 megapixels effective, unless you are a pro or quasi-pro photographer. You can access the full 48 megapixel sensor by shooting Pro RAW photos, Apple Pro RAW format. The only catch is those photos can be up to about 75 megabytes each. So if you want that full goodness to be able to manipulate however you want in your photo editing software, it comes at a price. So, if you're bad with money, you could get the 1 terabyte model. What else do I like? Dynamic Island's fun. I'm looking forward to seeing further third-party app support, but the first-party stuff, it's subtle, but it's you barely like the notch. I barely notice it, but now it's a feature, not a bug. And just the speed. It's my 10 was getting a little pokey, especially as I listen to podcasts about 3x or up to 3.5x. Trying to do much else on the phone, it tends to bog down a little bit. So this can handle it no problem. And I guess, and the other thing too is I set it up as a new phone. I did not transfer all my existing apps over. So this is a clean slate. I did the same with my iPad Air 5, which I got in August. So clean slate for both of them. So see how long it takes to fill them up and slow them down. And that's my pick of the week. Projects. I'm
glad you finally upgraded.
Me too. To be fair, I waited a year too long. I know for next time. 4 years, it's there. If you are a normal user, 5 years is definitely doable. I know people, they're still rocking. I know a guy that's rocking an iPhone 7 still and is perfectly happy with it. But if you fill your phone up with crap, or if you do stupid things like listening to podcasts at triple speed and other envelope pushing things, you want something a little newer. So maybe every 4 years is the right cadence for me in that, because that's what I had done in the past. But as these phones get more and more capable, maybe they'll last longer and longer. Just replace the battery every couple of years, which I did in my 10. Okay, so we got a couple projects from you this week, Tasia.
Yeah, well, this first one isn't really a project. It was just something I wanted to share with you guys. So this local Portland afternoon show reached out and wanted to do a tech segment. So I did that yesterday and it was fun and I crushed it, obviously. And duh. No. And so anyway, it was really nice. It was fun. And so they've asked me to come back whenever. So I don't know how often I'll do it because, add it to the list, but it was a lot of fun. So I just talked about some iPhone tips and tricks and that kind of thing.
How did they find you?
YouTube. It was a producer that reached out and she was just like, oh, we like your YouTube videos. Can you come on? And then a wildfire happened and I couldn't come on. And then the Queen died and I thought for sure I was going to get bumped again, but I didn't because it's an afternoon show on Pacific time. So that funeral was long done.
So
it was fun.
You are a multi-state influencer now.
I guess officially I can claim it. They linked to my YouTube channel and everything, you guys.
Love it. You're huge in Portland.
You may know me from my one appearance.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome. And so speaking of YouTube videos, what's your latest one?
The latest one was the killer 17-minute long iOS 16 video I put out that then was a big fail because I should have just stuck with my normal uploading time and day. And I was trying so hard to get it out early, but it didn't matter because iOS 16 had already been out for a few days. And that's basically a year's time in YouTube. People want things before they're released. So the whole thing was just kind of oh, this was so much work. But anyway, I stand by it. And I think that it was a very good video. So I just go over like some of my favorite iOS 16 features, which there are a ton. So I only did my favorites.
And where can people find your work?
YouTube.com/Tasia Custodi or TasiaCustodi.com.
Awesome. Well, Tasia, Gray, wonderful as always to chat with you. Favorite day of the week. Will, we miss you. Hopefully we'll be back. Get well, you and Naomi. Get well soon. And you can find out more about us at momentous.tv and all our socials at momentous.tv/links. And that's all we have to say. And I love it. And that's it. We hope your week is truly momentous.